Hey there, it's Ruth Hazelton here from a Hidden Culture blog. Today I'm going to be talking to Tim Meyen and Pip Thompson from the Supărați, also playing in that band, Simon Milman on bass and Alister Price on accordion. Thanks for joining me, Pip and Tim.
Hi, Ruth.
Thank you.
Pip and Tim have come along tonight to talk to us about world music. I have always disliked that term. I don't know about you guys, but I'm struggling to find an alternative. Culturally based, in folklore we'd call it transplanted music. Music that's come from somewhere else and been transplanted into a different culture. But we're going to talk a little bit about that, and these guys have a love of Lautari music, which is music of Gypsy Romania. So just to begin with, because we have played together in the past many years ago, and that period of time in the early 90s where world music had become really, really popular, and you'd see it, I think you'd probably notice it on festival stages around Australia. There was a lot more music played from other cultures around the world, and I really miss the Hungarian guys in particular that played at the National year after year. But what was it that actually, I know, Tim, your background was sort of, you played in the Tinkers early on in the piece, sort of a love for Irish music, and Pip, you come from a classical background, but maybe you could take it in turns and just tell me what it was about music from other cultures that grabbed you, and can you remember that time when that happened?
Well, I guess being a classically trained musician, I guess we don't often think of it this way, but actually classical music is all, by and large, that transplanted culture. So it, I guess, is a familiarity with that notion of something which is essentially foreign to all of us. I guess I really fell in love, as you know, with klezmer music, first of all, at a time when we were playing it that really no one knew what it was in Australia, and that's why everyone always had trouble with the band name, and they didn't know if it was klezmer or plasma, and no one knew what it was. But I really loved the sound, and I guess maybe from some influenced classical music there was a familiarity to that sound for me. So I guess that's the angle I came from.
And just asking you, Pip, where did you first come across klezmer music? I never asked you that either.
It's a really good question, and to be completely honest, I can't remember. I think I must have heard it maybe on the radio, CDs. I don't know. I certainly hadn't heard any live before we started playing it.
Interesting. And what about you, Tim? Because you started sort of in the Irish tradition.
Yeah. Well, the thing with me was that I kind of came into it through falling in love with that instrument, with the dulcimer, which is kind of basically the same sort of instrument that I play now. And that was just what people suggested. Yeah, this is what you can play on the dulcimer. You can play folk music. And I really liked the sound of that music as well. I really liked Appalachian music and kind of old-timey music in those days. I didn't really know what they were, but that's what got me into folk music from anywhere, really, as long as it was kind of an appealing tune. And the thing that I liked about the Irish scene, well, which was quite burgeoning in Canberra in those years, in the early to mid 90s, when I was getting into it, there was a lot of people, again, I think from the same motives, the same interest in kind of curiosity in something a little bit different. And, and even for most people, even Irish music was that in those days. I haven't heard this before. What is this music? You get those kind of questions. And so to me, like, the interest in Eastern European music that came later was just an extension of, it's just more tunes, different tunes from somewhere else. And I was a bit of a tune hound anyway. I was always looking for an interesting or curly kind of melody. And I didn't really distinguish at the beginning, I only like music from this one area or whatever. I just sort of followed my nose on that.
Yeah, because I recall there being a lot of interest at the time, sort of in that Canberra scene in Scandinavian music. Also, there are a couple of people there playing Transylvanian, Hungarian, and that sort of music. And both of you have played a little bit since then, haven't you, with the Hungarian and the Transylvanian scene. What was that like to sort of come as an outsider to learn a tradition within Australia? I'll get to the actually going to Romania part later on, perhaps, but even in Australia, there's that classic thing with migrant culture where people tend to cling to their tradition quite firmly, whereas their country of origin tends to move on culturally. So you get situations where there's a lot of purist kind of notion. Have you found that playing music with with other musicians in Australia who've got different cultural backgrounds?
I think you do see that trend, especially with listeners and with audiences, that they'll be frozen in time at the time when they left wherever it may be, Hungary or Greece or wherever, and that's their memory of music is kind of at that point, and they may not they may not like the music that's currently popular in their old country. So that creates all kinds of complexity. But I wanted to say, like, the thing to point out is that Australia's actually got a tradition now of people researching this music. And what you mentioned about the Transylvanian thing, the Transylvaniacs are a band that I've been in for years now, and they really inspired me on this idea of going back to that country and researching the music there. And there's been other Australians who've done that over the years, Lindsay Pollock and Xenos, and kind of going back right to the late 70s and 80s. And there've been, very small trickle, but it is kind of like a tradition of Australians who are curious about that some other countries' music enough to go and really research it there. Yeah.
It's very interesting, and I'm really glad to hear that's happening and evolving, because they've been such a vibrant part of Australian folk festival culture for a while. Pip, you also dance flamenco, and I wonder how that translates into that sort of a context, a tradition from somewhere else in Australia. Is there an extent of Australianism in the flamenco that you practice, or has it been very much a traditional pursuit?
I guess I would have to say that it's been very much a traditional pursuit, which is somewhat, I guess, the way I like it, because I like to feel that I've got the best possible understanding that I can have from inside that tradition, rather than trying to impose anything of myself on it. Having said that, in Spain and also here in Australia, there are amazing flamenco artists who are incorporating all kinds of elements, particularly musical elements, into that tradition. And I guess that's an evolution in and of itself. I guess I would have to say my understanding of flamenco music is through the dance, and there's a really important synergy there. But I guess a bit more of a purist and a traditionalist, I guess, because I'm a sort of a Johnny-come-lately to that tradition. But there's certainly a lot of commonality, I guess, in how I would choose to approach the study of flamenco or Romanian Lautari music, or any tradition that's not, I guess, part of my own cultural context.
Which kind of leads me to one of the questions I was going to end the interview with, but we might as well just go straight for it now, which is what would you guys, as people who have studied music from other cultures and interacted with those cultures, and people from those cultures, what would your advice be to other musicians from, an Anglo-Australian background who do? How does one go about learning this respectfully, and what is the best way, in your opinion, now that you've learnt and met the people, to go about it?
I think respect, the word that is respect, is really, really key, isn't it? And it actually makes me think of a story that you probably remember, that one time with the klezmer back in the day. We were playing a gig at the National Folk Festival and it was very late and probably some of the audience weren't entirely sober, but we were bailed up by a lady who demanded to know who in the band was Ukrainian, because some of the tunes we played, which we'd learnt as Jewish tunes, were also used in the Ukraine as hopkas. And this lady was actually furious that we were claiming them as Jewish tunes. And at the time it was really, really confronting and difficult, but I've thought about it a lot afterwards and thought that's a shred of that lady's culture that she's obviously very, very attached to, and it probably has all kinds of resonances for her. And if someone feels that you're not being respectful about a part of their culture, then it can be really, I guess, demeaning for them. And I think, well, you know, Tim can certainly talk about experiences in Romania and the importance of cultural sensitivity in all ways, not just musical.
Yeah. I think that idea of gathering as much information as you can and never assuming that you know it all about, I mean, because as I was going to say at the beginning, I was thinking about the questions you were going to ask, and the more you know, the more you want to say about them. But because music, as you know, is such a fractal thing, as you go into it, it just gets more and more complicated, and you go, oh, this looks interesting. Oh, but it's not what I first thought. There's actually heaps more to it. And, you know, and that's where you get to the nerd status, where it's like, well, yes, have you got a couple of days and I'll tell you all about it. So just being aware that, you know, there's always another level. There's always another level of complexity and meaning to it that I don't have, you know, and that someone else might see it a different way. And, you know, for some people, it's got family resonance. For some people, it's got, you know, childhood memories, resonances. And for other people, you know, it's bound up in all kinds of aspects of their personality. So you can't know what music will mean to another person. But I guess just to be kind of respectful about that, and then about what you say about it. I think often it comes down to what what you say about it, like whether you sound like you know about the thing you're talking about, or whether it sounds like you pretty much just kind of only learned it yesterday. Then, you know, people pick up on that like that.
Yeah. And I guess it depends in what space you're presenting it to, because as in performance is a very different space than playing sort of socially or for fun. And I've had this conversation with Zulia and Anya Tyrrell from Ireland in the last couple of weeks of audience expectations, that they really put themselves, as you're saying, their stories into the listening experience. So I guess there is, do you feel there's a lot of responsibility in curating what you're
yeah, I think there is some. That's a tricky one, because even curating is a form of change, isn't it? You know, kind of going, I think this is the best piece from this region or whatever, and this piece, it's not so great. You've already made a call on what you think should go in the mix and what shouldn't. But like, we all do that anyway. So that's kind of what I say, like, evolution and change will happen without you even trying, but just to be aware that it happens, I guess, and sort of.
Absolutely. What we might do there then is actually insert one of your pre-cooked tracks that you recorded at rehearsal. When was it? This week. And I think the first one that I'll pop in the video is, and I'm terrified of pronouncing it, the Lume,
Lume, yeah.
Lume. It's a beautiful, beautiful track, and I think we'll choose this one because it features Pip playing fiddle as well as that relationship between the cimbalom and the accordion. But I think just quickly, in terms of an explanation of what Lautari music is, and I'm really drawn to this explanation that you had on your Facebook site, that it was from 70s bars.
Oh, you like that one? I feel like I've written so many different little blurbs on what it is, trying to get that across to people in a couple of sentences, and it's really hard to pick things. But it's a lot of different things, and that's kind of why it's so beautiful. It's multi-layered music, so it has kind of so many influences. But just to try and put it simply, it is music that what has been created over decades by professional musicians in Romania. So people who are kind of like a cast of professional, it's like being in a guild, I guess, of this is what we do, we're musicians. And most of the people who do that work in that way are Roma or Gypsy people. Not all of them, but the vast majority, I'd say. And that is it kind of in a nutshell, but then you got to think that they're pros and they're doing music for people's weddings primarily. And they take everything from sort of very ancient ballads and stuff that's, got roots that go back centuries to, I want to hear the latest tune from America. Like, can you play something like that? And they have like a really different attitude actually to music than you encounter in the West, and especially in Australia. Like I think in Australia we've got a real culture of like, this is my music, I'll present it to you, see if you like it. And they're like, what do you want to hear? I'll play you whatever you want to hear, like, because I'm a professional. So that's a total flip of, and you can imagine what that does to the music. It puts so many different things in it because everyone wants to hear something different.
Oh, that's
so
wonderful.
That's why it's such a tasty stew of different ingredients.
All right, well, let's have a listen to the first excerpt of Tasty Stew. give us a little bit of a background about that piece and where you found that?
Yeah, so this is quite a famous piece. It's a song, and so we're just doing an instrumental version of the song melody. And it's a great song as well. Like the words are some of my favorite words because they have this kind of like real pretty black humor or kind of negative outlook on life, but there's always a bit of hope as well. I quite like the mix, but it's really deadpan sort of. So lumen means like the oh world, like so oh world. The lyrics say, "Oh world, when will I be tired of you? Oh, maybe when I hear the coffin boards being hammered together, then I'll be tired of living." And that's the way life is, you know. One person's born, another person dies. The person who's born suffers. The person who dies rots.
Right. And so there.
Just telling it like it is, you know. And yet that song with those kind of earthy lyrics, and probably like a rural origin for that song, has been turned into this kind of like torch singer song over the years. Like, so this was made famous by a singer called Maria Tanase, who's quite a famous Romanian singer in the 30s, and was kind of like the Romanian Edith Piaf. She had like a really kind of low, sonorous kind of voice, and she would do like a very slow kind of torch singer version of this type of song, which is crazy with the lyrics when it doesn't make sense on paper, but it becomes this kind of great combo of elements, I guess, like the sort of earthiness and the classiness as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece of music. I'm sure I think that's must be where I recognise it from, because I know that my ear picked up on that tune, but I must have heard it as the song. Yeah, amazing. I'd like to get you guys to talk a little bit about the actual physical, playing of this style of music. But just wanted to ask you too, how much was Taraf de Hajduk's and the movie Lautari an influence on you? You were talking before about that flip side of different way of playing music, and I think all of us were very affected at the time by that concept, particularly in a Western culture where we are, I will play my music for you, but we don't have the same traditions here of musicians playing at weddings or births or funerals in quite the same way in that culture. Just wondering if you wanted to comment on that whole scene of the elements. Yeah.
I feel like we've actually lived that movie now, which is it's quite it's now quite familiar territory. And I guess an interesting observation, Tim can probably speak to this more, but Taraf de Hajduk's, they're an amazing band, an amazing village band, but there are bands like that in every village in Romania, and those guys just had very, very good fortune to be picked up by French agents. But Tim certainly had experiences with bands in the next village.
I went to the village Mărșa, which is 10 kilometers away from Clejan, where La Chaudron, that scene was filmed, where that band
wow.
came from. And it's the same kind of people, the same music, but they don't have, they were just kind of grumpy because they stole the music from our village. So that the richness of that world in Romania really astounded me when I went there. Like, yes, I was very impressed by those films, and that gave me a rocket boost to kind of wanting to go there and check it out. And I was pretty stunned by the amount of people who are playing that music at a phenomenally high level.
Are most of them? Sorry, Tim. I just wanted to know: how are they trained? Is this stuff that they learn orally? It's part of the oral tradition.
Yeah, so that it's a family business. So you do the most of your learning as a child, and that when I first started going there, a lot of the people I learned from, I just stayed in their house, like in a village in their house, and they really didn't know how to deal with an adult student. So I just got treated like a child, basically. They told me how to brush my teeth and, you know, what I should eat, and and as well as music, because that's who they were used to teaching, was like really little kids. And then if you go through that family upbringing, then you know, by the time you're 18, you're just an amazing player. You don't have to practice anymore. Like you've done it all. You've done all your work. No, I mean, they do practice, but you just build up such a huge knowledge of that style and of that repertoire that they have, that then after that they can just, I won't say coast, but you know, they really do the hard yards in the kind of teen years and maybe early 20s and stuff.
It's really interesting to look at it as kind of a trade in some senses.
Absolutely.
Is it very rare for people to just fall in love with the music and want to join that trade if they're not from the family?
It's becoming more and more common now. Yeah. So it's, even in the last 20 years, it's changed so much. So Romania is just moving so much more towards being kind of like a Western country. So now lots of people are getting into that Lautari music for interest, you know, to play it for fun, or to play because they think they could make money playing at weddings or whatever. So, you know, I've never done this before, but I'll try and form a band. So it's totally loosening up. But in the past, no, like it was a trade, and it had that kind of guild aspects of as well. Like, no, we don't know who he is. We'll get the bass player from my uncle's family. You know, like we'll stick with the people we know, kind of thing. Yeah, and that's still there, but it'll start to dissolve over time.
And also for those people, it's a great. You know, it's a great choice of profession as well. Where we would any in Transylvania, you know, the choice for those people in that village is you can be a musician or you can be a garbage collector, and those are your two career options.
So a lot of this comes back to, you know, like let's talk about Roma and the trades that they were allowed to do. So there were certain trades that it was okay to do, and they actually became masters of almost all those trades. So tinsmithing, carving particular things, making pots and stuff, brick making, and music was another thing that people were like, okay, yeah, that's a job that we're fine with you doing.
And for that reason, is it also a primarily masculine endeavor?
Less than you would. There are more women in it than I first thought there would be, but yeah, let's be honest, it's pretty skewed. But there are some amazing women musicians that I've heard.
Did you come across a few in your travels, Pip?
Yeah, I've met a few. I mean, yeah, there is a tendency for them to be singers, but there's like an amazing female Cimbalom player who plays in restaurants in Bucharest that I have heard, and she's like the equal of any of the top players.
And what did they make of you, Pip, over there?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say I was in many ways the secret weapon, because we did come across people who didn't necessarily want to share or didn't necessarily want to play with us, but because then I would get out the violin and I would play a bit, and they would be so appalled at the idea of a female violinist that they would have to play to show me up. And so we ended up getting some really great stuff and really good recordings. But it was, you know, it was certainly not, we were regarded as pretty strange anyway, and that was just, you know, the icing on the cake of strangeness. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think we're running out of time, so we'll just go to the next level of strange, shall we, and talk about the Cimbalom itself, which has 145 strings.
Yeah, mine does, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a 5-string banjo player and I can't handle 5 strings. How long does it take you to tune that instrument, Tim?
I'm down to a good half an hour now.
Man, that's incredible.
Well, some people say I don't do a very good job, but you know, like it's it's an organic process. As soon as you finish, you've got to start again. So same as all this.
And I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but it's initially sort of a more Hungarian based instrument. That there were smaller instruments, I believe.
The cool thing about what happened with the Cimbalom in Romania was that they saw the big ones that were created in Hungary around the end of the 19th century, and they kind of took them on board and they started using them in a different way. So the playing style is quite different to how it was played in Hungary. And that's the thing that really sold me on Romanian music, is like the way that my instrument is used in it. It's just, to me, the best. Like it's in everything, which I think is great. And it's really rhythmic. So it's like the drum kit. But occasionally you also have a solo and play the melody and stuff. So it's kind of a real core part of that music. In a way that it almost isn't in Hungary. Like I've played lots of Hungarian music too, and there's beautiful music for the Cimbalom, but I always feel like the Cimbalom in Hungary is like the cherry on top of the cake. Like you could have it or not, but like since we've got one, yeah, okay, it's a little bit of extra decoration. But in Romanian music, it's like the flower. You need to have it there, otherwise the music doesn't even run properly. It's almost like that.
That's wonderful. So I guess for people who haven't seen the Cimbalom, that's what Tim was thumping away on in the corner there. Is the Romanian Cimbalom the largest version of that instrument?
Well, like you alluded to, there are small ones that they still use, which I can almost show you how big they are.
Ah, yes.
And that you wear, on a strap around your neck, so you can walk.
Yep. So is that what would be played sort of in a more village setting?
Yes, a lot of people still are playing them, but anyone who can afford to get a big one also gets a big one, because the little ones are great, but they're a very they have a kind of rural vibe to them. So
okay.
Speaking of tuning, they really are never in tune. So, it's always got that kind of funky sound to it, which people don't mind for some styles, but for other things, like if you wanted to play more virtuoso kind of style, then you need a big one.
Oh, okay. And you play them with hammers, is that right?
Yes, you do. Yes, here's a
do you
hammer.
Have any of those to point to the camera? So
yeah, now let's see if we can get a good light. So there's the hammer, which is like just a thin rod, and it's got a handle there, and you hold it in an unusual way, not like a drumstick, but between the two fingers. And on the end, people always wonder what this is cotton wool on the end to make it a bit of softer sound, a bit like felt on a piano hammer.
Yeah.
And play it with no wool, and then it's just really loud and clattery.
Yeah. Just like
we like
good.
It. One of my teachers used to go and do gigs, and the rest of the band, they didn't have enough mics, so they played the violin and the accordion through the sound system, and then the Cimbalom he would just play with just pure wooden sticks, and he was loud enough to compete with the piano.
Incredible. And in terms of fiddle too, in that style, do you violin fiddle? Is there any specific ornamentation or technique of playing or holding the fiddle for this style of music?
There is, and in some ways, it's quite a nice fit for me, because certainly under communism in Romania, as in a lot of Eastern Europe, there was a real sort of fusion of classical and traditional folk techniques, and violin was certainly one area where that really happened. But I think what is so beautiful about that music is the ornate ornamentation. So there are a lot of trills and a lot of quite quite specific ornaments, which are not, there's certainly nothing like the classical tradition, but I guess your skill as a violin player is to do with how beautifully you can ornament even quite a simple tune, and how you can, I guess that's where the improvisatory element comes in. It's not that you're improvising the tune, you're improvising the really, really intricate and sort of sophisticated ornamentation. And I think that's one of the things we love about it, and the fact that it's a very beautiful violin sound generally that is valued in that tradition. It's not, a lot of people think of folk music that it always has to be rough, but it's really a very, very refined and sophisticated sound, but also as loud as you can play, because you don't always have a PA.
Yeah, no PA. All right, well, we might wrap it up, but prior to me asking you about the second tune that you pre-recorded this week, I would like to know, these guys have been running a bit of or having a bit of a showdown on Facebook about their favourite Arnott's biscuit.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to know, have you actually come up with a winner for this competition of what is the favourite biscuit, or is it still...
We're still researching it. It's a very biscuit-powered band. Like, we're lucky in that everyone in the band has put in a lot of time on this. You know, like my nerdy interest is enough to carry me through, but for everybody else, they need biscuits. And we came up with that idea of doing a review. I think largely because we just had no idea what other content to post. But you know, biscuit reviews is valuable knowledge, I think.
What's your personal favourite, Tim?
I think for me the surprise has been the lemon crisps, which I was resisting all the way, thinking, no,
that's
lemon.
that bit of saltiness, isn't it?
Yes, you know them, I see.
What about you, Pip?
Look, I've always been a fan of the mint slice, but I have to say the lemon crisp was a really refreshing and welcome change, and they did score quite highly for us.
We've got a revolution happening here. Cool. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been really lovely to catch up with you both, and we'll, I think, play this second tune on the way out. But first of all, I'll get you to introduce it and talk a little bit about where you found that song.
Sure. This is two dances. It's a kind of dance called Serba, which suggests some relation to Serbia, but no one really knows. I don't think there actually is, but this is a classic kind of dance all across the south part of Romania, so along the border with Bulgaria and then over towards the border with Serbia. So there might be some Serbian influence on it originally, but they don't play really dances in this rhythm in Serbia, so I'm confused by that name. But the first one is called the Fireman's Serba, and it actually was, I think it was composed by Dinicu, quite famous kind of Romanian violinist and composer. And the second one is a Serba from a place called Medgidia, which is in Dobrogea. That's right near the border with Bulgaria. So big kind of Bulgarian influence on the music there as well. And that was from the repertoire of one of my favorite players, Tony Iordache. He was like the king of the Cimbalom. So it's one of his pieces.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Ruth.
Bye.